while you are finding lesson 13 in your notes package, a couple of things to let you know of. Okay, obviously your cell anatomy lab is due next week. I gotta double check the date on that. It is due on Wednesday. Okay, so that would be what, November 2nd, I believe. Okay? So, cell anatomy lab, Wednesday, November 2nd. Okay. So make sure you've got that ready. I've also put the date of your unit exam up. All right, because we are, well, rapidly approaching the end of this unit. November 9th is going to be the day of your unit exam. Okay, and we will do the usual stuff, the stuff we did for the chem exam as well. Okay, I'll have a review day. I'll post a review package that you can use to prepare for that exam, because really I've only got about 2 or 3 days more of teaching you new material, and the rest of it is us working on some things. So, okay, you'll have all the material you need to study within the next couple of days here. Tomorrow, we are going to be starting a lab that will run over the weekend and that we'll check the data on Monday. Right? So tomorrow's class will be devoted to doing the pre-lab and getting it set up. It's basically just going to be a plant transport lab. So we're going to put plants in some dyed water and leave them over the weekend in the sun, hopefully, and see what they do in terms of transporting water and how much they can transport over that period of time. Pretty straightforward, pretty easy stuff. Okay, and then Monday we'll be looking at more stuff to do with plant growth and development, and then Tuesday and Wednesday working on Tuesday in-class activity. Wednesday and Friday will be your plant research project, and Thursday we'll probably be looking at like finishing the last bit or even doing our unit exam review that day. So like I said, not much left for us to go over in this unit. Okay? So we may even be starting the next unit before we write the exam for this one. All right, key points for today. We want to understand what factors influence the growth of plants. Okay, we want to look at what hormones are responsible for growth and development in plants, because plants, just like animals, have chemical signals that trigger certain responses in them. Okay, and number 3, understand that the plant shape, the shape of a plant is not fixed, but it is the result of the interaction between environmental factors and the growth responses of the plant. You can have genetically identical plants grown from a cutting of the same plant, and they will grow to be very different if you put them in different places. For example, back when I was allowed to have more plants in here, okay, I had 2 plants that were genetically identical. I know that because I grew them both from a cutting of the same plant. Okay? One of them I had over there in the corner where my filing cabinet used to be, okay, and it just sat on top of the filing cabinet. Right? And it never got moved, never got touched, barely ever got watered. I mean, we saw the pictures of my plants the other day. Okay, it just sat there. The other one I had sat over on my desk in front of Will. Because it was close to the window and I didn't always have these opaque blinds, I would water it, and every time I watered it, I would turn it 45 or 90 degrees. Okay, so every time it got watered, it got rotated. The plant that sat over in that corner and never got moved only grew on one side. It grew one long, spindly kind of branch down the side of the filing cabinet. This one was perfectly uniform all the way around. Why are they looking different if they're genetically identical? Because if you had someone who was genetically identical to you, you'd look the same. Why do those plants not look the same? Okay, they got a little bit different amount of sunlight for sure, but what did I do to that plant that I never did to this one?
You balanced the amount of sunlight that it got all around the plant so that it got equal nutrition.
Exactly. Okay, that plant had to grow towards its light source. So did that plant. The difference was that plant constantly got tormented. Okay, every time I watered it, I turned the leaves away from the sun. So it would have to grow new leaves on the side that was sunny. And if I kept turning it, it just grew perfectly even because I kept making it grow leaves on a different side. That plant I never ever turned. Well, why would it grow leaves towards the wall? There's no sun over there. Okay? A plant naturally knows where its food source is, light, and it grows towards it. Okay? We're going to learn about that. It's called phototropism. Okay? And they don't do that. So that plant on the filing cabinet that never got moved only grew towards the sun on that side because that's the side that always faced the sun. Okay? Whereas the plant that was always getting turned was always growing towards the sun. It just had to grow in a different direction all the time. That sort of makes sense. Okay? So a plant's final shape is not genetically predetermined. Okay? Some of its characteristics are, like the shape of its leaves, okay, kind of its color and things like that. Those are things that are genetically predetermined, but its final shape is not. Its final shape is an interaction between its genetics and its environment. Okay? For us, that's not so much the case. Okay? If we had two identical twins separated at birth, and incidentally they've done lots of studies on this, okay, they're going to grow up to be very, very similar. Now, if one is in, an environment where they have everything and they're well fed, and the other one is kept, not that anyone would do this, but unfortunately someone has, okay, like left in a closet and barely ever fed, yeah, they're not, they're still going to look basically alike, but one isn't going to grow as much because they don't get as much nutrition or as good a nutrition or something like that. That's a terribly dark example, and you would never do anything like that. I'm just making an extreme case here. Okay? In that case, yes. Okay, if there were major differences in nutrition and stuff like that, then yeah, they wouldn't grow up to be exactly the same. Okay, but they'd still both have 2 arms, 2 legs, 5 fingers on each hand, and 5 toes on each foot, and all that kind of stuff. Okay, that's all genetically predetermined. Does that sort of make sense? Okay, they've even done studies of twins who were separated at birth because they were adopted by different families, and found that they're even very much mentally alike, even though they grew up in different environments. Okay, they had a case of 2 twins who were separated at birth, and when they met up, they discovered they had both bought exactly the same car. That they both liked a red Ford Galaxy. Okay, they both bought exactly the same car. Okay, it kind of pokes a hole in the whole nature-nurture argument. Okay, are you a product of your nurturing, or are you a product of your genetics? Okay, for a plant, it's both. Okay. All right. So, what are some things a plant needs? If we're talking about factors that influence the growth of a plant, what are some things that influence the growth of a plant? Basic resources a plant requires. Sunlight, absolutely. Okay, what else? Water. Soil. What else? You're putting it in the air right now. CO2. CO2, yeah. It's one we often forget about, but if you tried to grow a plant in a pure oxygen environment, it would die. Okay? Because it wouldn't get the raw materials it needs to make sugar. All right. Do those resources, are they the same everywhere? They're not. Okay? If you are a plant that lives in the tropics, you get the same amount of light every day, all year long. Right? And one thing we don't have up here also stays pretty much the same every single day, all year long. What would it be that affects the growth of a plant? Plants don't grow very well in freezing temperatures. Okay? Temperature would certainly affect the growth of the plant as well. Okay? So, if you grow in a different place and you know that your temperature and light basically never change, you've got it pretty easy. Okay? Plants up here, right? The amount of light they receive varies quite a bit, even during their growing season. Okay? Plants here, they start getting their leaves on kind of early to mid-May. Right? Well, early to mid-May, we're getting, about 14 hours of sunshine, okay, each day. Well, by the time they're at their peak of growth, it's also around the summer solstice where we're getting 18, 19 hours worth of sunlight. But by the time they're losing their leaves, we're down to 12. Okay? And obviously when they're not growing, We're down to like 6, okay, on like December 21st, you know, when you go to school in the dark and you go home in the dark and you never see the sun for a month and a half. Okay, like, yeah, it varies a lot. That's why the plants don't grow very much. Also, when we don't get as much light, it's also cold. Okay, those two kind of tend to go along with each other. Amount of water. Some places are obviously a lot wetter than others. Plants have to adapt to that, grow roots deeper or wider or whatever. Okay, soil. Some soils are good. Some soils are not. Okay, even like around here, our soils are very sandy. If you go further north in Alberta, the soils are much different. Okay, around here our soil is kind of a light to dark brown, whereas if you go further north, it's almost jet black. Okay, and that's because the rocks that make the soil up, or that were eroded to make the soil, are different. Down here, most of our soil is from eroded sandstone. Okay, if you go further north, it's from eroded limestone. Makes different types of soil. All right, and then obviously the amount of CO2, that's pretty much fixed everywhere. Okay, I mean, we all share the same atmosphere unless you're in like a heavily polluted area or something where there might be more carbon dioxide in the local environment. Carbon dioxide is fairly level, okay? But there have been lots of experiments to verify this. If you talk to a plant, it'll grow better. Why? Because it likes you? What are you breathing out on it when you talk to it?
CO2.
CO2. Okay, they've done lots of studies on this. If you talk to a plant, it'll grow better. Okay, it makes you seem crazy, but less crazy than going up and just breathing on it, because that's even more weird. Okay, but it's certainly true. Okay, you're giving it that little bit of extra carbon dioxide directly, so it grows a little bit better. Okay? So all of these things are certainly going to affect the growth of a plant. Okay, so for plants, okay, obviously they're not like something out of the Lord of the Rings. They don't pick up and walk around and do crazy things. Okay, they're stuck in one place. They're rooted to that location for life. So they have to adapt to the conditions that are there. Animals don't have to do that. Okay, if the environment becomes uninhabitable or hostile to an animal, they just pick up and go. Right, they'll go somewhere else. They have that ability. Plants do not. So their final shape or form needs to be somewhat plastic. That is, that it can change throughout its lifespan. So most of these trees have trunks that go straight up. Okay? Almost all of them. Except this one. Why is that one's trunk different? I know it's kind of hard to see, the picture's a little dark. Partially, although, I mean, there's not a lot to shade it here. If it just grew like this, would it still get the same amount of sun? Probably. Okay, I mean, it's certainly something that affects it.
It had to adapt to being on an angle to be able to grow up.
Yeah. Okay. Plants have actually kind of a sense of up and down. Not really balance, but they do balance themselves with their growth. Probably what happened was there was an avalanche or a rock slide that knocked this tree over when it was young. Okay? Because like you see, all the other trees are straight. Okay? This tree started out straight and then got knocked over. If it kept growing out this way, more and more weight would be pulling it this way, which would pull it out of the ground and uproot it. Okay? So plants will naturally try and grow according to gravity. And you can see some extreme examples. I'll try and find some pictures that I have, okay, of trees that just wickedly change their shape in order to balance themselves or grow around obstacles, okay, and things like that. Trees can really do that. If you've ever seen bamboo, you can buy bamboo at the store that's got a coil in it. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that. It used to be like a really popular thing. But all you do is you just train it. You just tie it to a pipe. And as it grows, you tie it to the pipe, and keep tying it to the pipe, and it'll grow around the pipe. And you take the pipe out, and you go, here, look at my cool plant. Okay? Because it's grown, now that the pipe's not there, it just looks like it's got a coil in it. Okay. All right, so plants can do that. It's how they adapt to changes in their environment in order to survive. Okay, so this is what I was talking about before. A house plant on a windowsill is going to grow towards light. Okay? Because light is its source of energy that it uses to make glucose. Right? So these sprouts here, okay, where do you suppose their light source is? Okay. Yeah, that way. Okay? Because look, all their foliage, all their leaves are facing that direction. Okay? A plant is naturally going to orient its photosynthetic organs, leaves, towards its source of light. Okay? So it will naturally bend like that. That is called phototropism. Okay? Tropism means a curvature or a growth pattern. Okay? Photo is a growth pattern in response to light. Okay? So phototropism is a curvature or growth pattern because of or towards light. Okay? We call this positive phototropism because it's actually towards the light source. You very rarely see negative phototropism. Like the light source would have to be hot and harsh for a plant to actually grow away from it. Okay, in a forest or other natural ecosystem, okay, plants can be crowded. So there's competition. Okay, there's competition for light and water and things like that. So plants will naturally grow towards the light in order to compete with each other and because they need light. But if you're a small plant in that situation and you're shaded, how do you know where the light is? All these other big plants have shaded you out because they're taller than you. You still need to grow to the light. How do you know where it is? Where is light generally in a natural ecosystem? Up. Okay? That's why plants can also use gravity to tell them which way to grow. Okay? So if they can't see the light, they'll generally grow upwards because up is generally where light will be. Okay? We call that geotropism because it's a response to the Earth's gravity. All right, so all these growths, all these patterns of growth and plant growth in general is controlled just like ours is. It's controlled by hormones, chemical signals that the plant can make that tell it to do certain things. Okay, so there's 5 major classes of plant hormones that we're going to go over, okay, and they each are responsible for a slightly different pattern or type of growth within the plant. All right, so we look at these little sprouts here. Where's the light source? Left or right? Right. What's up with the last one? Why is it growing the way it's growing when all the others are like this? Exactly. It's at the back. It wouldn't have got any light when it first started growing because all the others were in the way. So what did it do? It grew up. Okay? Up would be the next most likely route to get to light. Okay? If it grew this way like the others, it would have to grow really, really far in order to get to a spot where it would be like here, where it could actually see some sunshine, okay, or whatever the light source is. So growing up, okay, would allow it to get into that sunshine even quicker. All right. So, first type of plant hormone that we're going to go over are called auxins. Okay? Auxins are effectively growth hormone. Okay? They result in the lengthening of the plant. Okay? So plants will get longer as a result of auxins. Okay? Now, pick the first 2 pictures here, okay, on the left. This is actually, believe it or not, a before and after picture. What do you suppose happened here? And it has to do with auxins. It has to do with plant growth. Okay, I'll give you a hint. These 2 pictures were taken a few weeks apart in Southeast Asia in 1969. What was going on in Southeast Asia in 1969? Yeah, the Vietnam War was going on. Okay, now, the Vietnam War did not go well for either side, but especially for the Americans. Okay? They were fighting in an environment they had basically no experience fighting in, and they were fighting an enemy who knew it very, very well. The enemy knew it very, very well and was able to hide in lots and lots of places. Well, because it's a jungle. okay? And so it's easy to hide in the jungle and ambush the other soldiers, and, well, the Americans didn't like that, okay? So, being the kind of richer and more powerful country with lots of resources to play with, they said, we're tired of getting ambushed in the jungle. Find a way to get rid of the jungle. Here you go, CIA, here's a job for you, okay? And so they come up with, kind of few obvious ideas. Nuclear carpet bombing, okay, things like that, those generally get, they get tossed out, but they're not taken seriously for obvious reasons, okay? Burn it down. Okay, it's a tropical rainforest. Fires don't really work very well in a place that's generally flooded and wet all the time, so that one's kind of out. Okay, we can't set it on fire. What if we drop napalm all over it? Okay, napalm burns no matter what. Yeah, but there's people who live there, so that, some of the people are innocent, so we don't want to, set them on fire. That would be bad. So, they had to throw that one out. So finally they said, what if we find a way to kill the plants? And then Americans are like, okay, but lots of things that kill plants also kill people, so you kind of got to find something that's selective and it'll only kill the plants. So, a little while later, CIA comes back with this chemical. They call it Agent Orange. It's a herbicide, and it's a selective herbicide. It only kills things with broad leaves. Okay? So, they equip a bunch of helicopters with tanks and spray nozzles, and they paint on the side of them a picture of Smokey the Bear, and it says, only you can prevent forest. And these helicopters go out and they spray the forest, and the forest literally grows itself to death. Because what Agent Orange is a synthetic oxide. It's absorbed through the stomates of the leaves of the plants, and it stimulates uncontrollable growth. So these plants just grow really, really fast, so fast that they can't gain the nutrients and stuff they need from the soil, and they literally grow themselves to death. Okay? A few weeks later, no forest, nowhere for people to hide. Okay? Now, it was later discovered that this stuff doesn't just kill trees, it also causes cancer and other really nasty things, but of course that wasn't discovered till later. Okay? But it worked. It got rid of the trees because, well, it was a synthetic plant hormone that made the plants do what that hormone would normally do, okay? As most overdoses or, let's say, intake of synthetic hormones would do, okay? Do people sometimes use more or synthetic hormones? Yeah, okay? You guys ever seen the roid monkey at the gym? Okay, sorry, that's really not a nice term to use, but okay, the person who has chosen to use steroids and get giant and angry, that guy, okay? It's the same deal. Okay? They're taking more hormones in their body than their body would normally produce, and as a result, they get gigantic muscles and anger. Okay? So it's still the same thing, but it's going to have side effects. Okay? Your body's not supposed to have that much of that hormone in it, okay? And so that can cause cancers. Okay, for one. And it usually also causes the glands that normally produce that hormone to kind of shut down and shrink. Side effect, bad side effect. Okay, if you are taking testosterone, okay, as a synthetic steroid, and the organs that produce testosterone will shrink. Side effect, probably not desirable. Just putting it out there. All right. Also, if you're a woman and take testosterone, will that have an effect? Okay, if you've ever, I don't know if you guys have ever seen like pictures of the like 1980s Soviet era like swim teams and athletes, okay, like Olympic athletes, they look kind of mannish. Okay, even some of the American sprinters, okay, like Florence Griffith Joyner, okay, she was very mannish, okay, because she took testosterone. She cheated, and she took steroids, took testosterone, which gave her the secondary male sexual characteristics that you would associate with a man. Big muscles, hair, okay, things like that. Okay, and so that's what they do. Hormones just cause certain things to happen in any organism. Auxins always cause a plant to get longer. Okay? Now the other problem with auxins is they cause lengthening, but they don't cause the plant to grow supportively, so wider. So you get a long, skinny plant that tips over easily. Anyone ever seen what happens to the dandelions in town when they spray them? right? They just get all long and coily and then they die. Okay? They're spraying them with Agent Orange. Okay? Killex, okay, is the same chemical as Agent Orange. It only affects broadleaf plants, so it leaves the grass alone because it has narrow leaves, but affects the weeds, which have broad leaves, okay, and kills them off by making them grow themselves to death. Okay? That's also why they put the signs out everywhere they spray that say, this area has been sprayed, stay off for 5 days, okay, because it's not good for you. Right? Making some sense? Okay, auxins make plants get longer. Okay, that's what they do. All right, they also don't do much in terms of root growth. Okay, auxins, so this would be a normal plant right here. Or sorry, this would be a normal plant. We get, the sprout, we get some leaves, and we get fairly healthy root growth. If you spray it with too much auxin, okay, we get way more foliage growth and almost no root growth, which again compounds that problem of growing yourself faster than you can support. Okay, and the other thing that auxins can do is they can help a plant produce fruit with no seeds. I mean, people like seedless fruit. Okay? Like it's nice to not have that, orange with the chunks in it. Okay? The way that they typically do that is they trick the flower into thinking it's been pollinated by giving it just a light, ever so light dusting of auxins. Okay? Not enough to kill it or make it unhealthy, but it's a chemical signal to the flower. When pollen lands on it, there's a chemical signal that happens there that says, okay, pollen has arrived, fertilization is going to occur, make fruit because we need to encase the seeds that will be produced in fruit. That's what fruit is for. Okay? It's there to nourish the seeds. If you give it a light dusting of auxin, it tricks it into thinking it's been pollinated and it'll make fruit. But because it hasn't been pollinated, there won't be any seeds. Okay? So that's how they trick plants into making seedless fruit. All right, cytokinins, second group of hormones. Cytokinins cause cytokinesis, or cell division. Okay. Cytokinins obviously allow for the production of larger numbers of cells, new cells. That allows a plant to replace old or dying cells, okay? Just producing new ones from healthy cells. Okay? That is what partially allows some plants to have really extended lifespans. Okay? The oldest living organism on Earth is the Methuselah tree, and it grows in the Joshua Tree National Forest in Northern California, and it is estimated to be almost 6,000 years old. Okay? If you are constantly replacing old cells with new cells, you can live a lot longer. Right? Kind of the fountain of youth for certain types of plants. Okay. Everyone all right with that idea? Okay, so that's really all you need to know about cytokinins. Cytokinins make more cells and can allow a plant to have a long lifespan. Now, if you're an annual, so you grow for like one season and then you die, this is not really a big deal other than helping you to grow during your short season. Okay, but other than that, it's obviously not going to allow you to grow for a long period of time because you don't have any ability to overwinter. Okay, so it's really only good for perennial plants. Okay, gibberellins. Gibberellins are a generalized growth hormone. Okay, and they can affect the growth of the shoot. Okay, not so much like a little bit like auxins, but more that they are focused on like growth in the leaves and the stem, but not in the roots, okay? And not on secondary growth in any way. All right, so in stems, okay, gibberellins stimulate cell elongation and cell division, so they're kind of a generalized growth hormone, okay? Kind of a combination of the auxins and cytokinins. Right? They can cause this to happen. Okay, so if we have like a dwarf version of a plant, okay, versus a tall version of a plant, because sometimes you can do that with plants, okay, the dwarf versions typically don't produce very much gibberellin, thus they don't get very tall. Okay, other ones you can stimulate to produce more, and they'll get taller. There's also something that happens in rice paddies. Okay, sometimes you guys ever seen what a rice paddy looks like? Okay, where they grow the rice, it's like fields, but they're flooded. okay? And the rice kind of grows out of these flooded fields. Well, with all that moisture comes the possibility of fungus growing. There are crops getting a fungal infection. One of the fungal infections that can affect rice causes foolish seedling disease. Okay? What do you notice about these two plants? Or these two sets of plants? The ones on the right are? The stalks are smaller, right? They're taller, but the stalks are smaller. So foolish seedling disease, the fungus affects the roots, and it causes the roots to produce lots of gibberellins, which make the plant go up, but not out. And it tips over. It gets too tall and can't support its own weight and falls over. Foolish seedlings. Okay, that's why it's called foolish seedling disease. Okay, and it can affect large amounts of rice crops if it happens. Okay, gibberellins can also affect the amount of fruit by affecting how many flowers will be produced, okay, or how many blossoms will be produced. Okay, so you get increased fruit size, okay, versus small fruits, okay, so much bigger, all right, because you're getting different amounts of blossoms. So if you've ever had like the strawberries from Costco, you know, or some of the ones, you know, that you see even in other grocery stores where they're like huge, okay, or you get the grapes that like look like an apple, okay, those are generally ones that are produced, okay, in this way. Okay? We're getting larger fruit, okay, by reducing the amount of fruit. So individual parts are bigger. Okay, abscisic acid. This one's really important for plants that are perennial, especially plants up here that grow every year. Because abscisic acid helps them prepare for winter. It's what allows them to go dormant. Okay? So abscisic acid slows down the growth of a plant and helps it to assume a dormant state. And it does this you'll need to add, okay? You'll need to add this part to your notes, okay? Abscisic acid does this by disrupting chlorophyll production. Okay? That's why the leaves go from green to, well, here in Alberta, yellow. Okay? We kind of get yellow. If you've ever been like to central Canada or eastern Canada, fall looks very different. Okay? They get yellow and red and orange, and the colors are far more vibrant. Here we get yellow. Okay? So you get this happening because the plant has other pigments other than chlorophyll that help it carry out photosynthesis. And when you stop the production of chlorophyll, you don't see the green anymore because chlorophyll is green. Okay? What you see are the other pigments that are left behind. They are secondary to chlorophyll. They can carry out some photosynthesis, but not enough to sustain the plant. Okay? So its growth slows, right? And then stops. And if you're not carrying out a lot of photosynthesis, what do you not need to transport anymore? What needs to leave the plant in order for photosynthesis to occur? Oxygen's produced, but something else needs to leave the plant. Water. So if you're not carrying out photosynthesis, you don't need to transport water. Is it good for a plant to stop transporting water before winter? Yes. You ever see what happens to a water bottle when you put it in the freezer? Right? The bottom pops out. Sometimes if it's in a glass container, the glass will break because water expands when it freezes. If you're a tree, you don't want your xylem full of water when the freeze comes. It'll literally shatter the tree. Okay? That water will freeze inside the xylem, and it'll expand, and it'll break all those xylem tubes, and even to an extent, pop the tree. Okay? So trees do this, okay, and all plants that go dormant do this in order to get the water out. Okay, so that there's no more water in them, okay, during the winter time. Okay? Or if it's like the phloem sap, there hasn't been a lot of sap produced, phloem sap, because there hasn't been a lot of chlorophyll, but that phloem sap has a lot of sugar in it, which acts like an antifreeze. Okay? So it can keep that stuff from expanding when it freezes. Okay? So what we see in this picture here in the middle, okay, is these are all different, like, I think they're lilies, calla lilies or something like that. The ones in the back, no abscisic acid. Okay? There's no abscisic acid in the ones in the back. So they've grown, they've got their flowers, okay, they're super happy looking. And as we move towards the foreground of the picture, we see increasing dosages of abscisic acid. What do you notice about the plants in the very front row here? They're all what? Do they look like plants even? They're pretty stunted, right? Like their growth has essentially been stopped. They were given doses, the highest dose of abscisic acid, so they hardly grew, okay? And you can see that the color changes, right? Like we've got kind of yellow here, okay? Some more yellow. This is a yellowish green, but as you go further back, you get darker and darker green because that abscisic acid disrupts the production of chlorophyll. The more abscisic acid you have, the less chlorophyll you produce, so the more you see those other pigments, which are yellow, orange, okay, things like that. So the color changes, and that's why the leaves change color. Okay? So abscisic acid, pretty important if you are growing from year to year in a place that has distinct seasons. And that could include a wet and a dry season. So if you're a plant that lives in like the hot desert and the rainy season is over, you might want to go dormant before the dry season. Okay? Not bother doing anything for the dry season because it'll take too much water. Some plants will do that. All right. And then ethylene. Okay, so ethylene is a gas. And it's produced generally by the sepals, or sepals sometimes they're called. Okay? The sepals are the little leaves that you see at the base of a flower. Okay? They're green still, okay? They're leaves, but they're the base of a flower. So they produce this gas. And what it causes is the ripening of fruit. And the natural aging of a plant. So, what's the purpose of fruit? Why do some plants produce it? Fruit is there to encourage seeds to grow in one of two ways. Either the fruit falls off the tree and rots and produces a nutrient-rich medium, okay, full of sugars and things like that that a growing seed can use, or the fruit is consumed by an animal and then digested. And then the seeds, which are usually too hard to be digested, will be deposited on the ground in a nutrient-rich medium from which they can grow. Yes? Right? In fact, there are some plants that their seeds won't germinate unless they've gone through the digestive tract of an animal. Okay? There's actually a case in, I think it's in South America. There's a tree that's going extinct because its seeds can't germinate unless they're eaten, unless the fruit is eaten by a dodo bird. And what happened to the dodo? They've been extinct for a while. So these trees, we're dependent on them to germinate into seed. So these trees are going to go extinct because their seeds won't germinate unless the fruit they make is eaten by a dodo. Okay? Crazy stuff, but true. Right? So ethylene helps the fruit to ripen because ripe fruit is generally bright in color and attracts animals to eat it. Now, what fruit do you suppose produces the most ethylene? What fruit goes bad the fastest? Bananas. That's why there's the banana principle. It's a corollary of Murphy's Law. Okay? It goes like this. If you buy bananas when they're green, you'll eat them before they're ripe. If you buy bananas ripe, they'll be rotten before you eat them. It's totally true. Okay? I know every time I buy green bananas, they're eaten before they're even yellow. If I buy them yellow, they're browning in the bowl. It happens every time. Okay? Because bananas produce tons of ethylene. You don't want to have bananas around anything else. Because if you do, it's going to go rotten fast. Because ethylene, it doesn't, like fruit doesn't care where the ethylene comes from, it just causes the same reaction. Okay? Oftentimes in North America, what we have to do with like tomatoes, right? If we, because we get frosts pretty early, especially in Canada, you have to pull the tomatoes off your vines while they're still green, okay? Or they'll get frosted and then they won't be any good. So you bring them in the house and you hope that they'll ripen in the house. A great way to get them to ripen quickly is to throw them in a box with a couple of apples. Okay? Apples will produce ethylene, not as much as bananas, and pretty soon you'll have a nice ripe box full of tomatoes. Okay? If you can capture that gas, okay, it'll help things ripen. A few years back, they actually had this advertisement on TV for these special food storage bags. Okay? And they were green, and inside the lining of the bag was a material that absorbed ethylene gas. Okay? So you could put stuff in, like in the advertisement, they were showing like strawberries that had been in this bag for like 3 months, and they were still fine. Okay? Because all the ethylene that they produced was being absorbed by the inside of the bag, and the fruit was staying good for a really, really long time. Same with like lettuce and stuff like that. So if you can capture or eliminate that ethylene gas, then your fruit will stay good longer. All right. Okay, so ethylene-induced yellowing also happens in leafy plants. So if you had like cabbage, okay, and you put cabbage near a banana, cabbage will go yellow really fast. All right, now we got to talk about the tropisms. There's only 3 tropisms, so they're pretty easy to remember because they're caused by very different things. Okay, so the first thing is that we have to know what a tropism is. So a tropism is a growth response that results in the curvature of the plant, either just one part of it or the whole thing. Okay, and that is they grow towards or away from any stimuli. All right, so the mechanism for a tropism, and this is important, is differential rate of growth on opposite sides of the organ. So if a plant's going to curve and grow towards something, one side of the plant has to grow faster than the other. Okay, so if I'm looking at this plant right here, which side, the bottom or the top, grew faster? The bottom, yeah, because it had to grow farther in order to cause this curve. So what a plant does in order to make this happen is it secretes auxins. Might want to add this. To one side. So the cells on one side of that plant produce more auxins than the other, and they get longer. Longer than the ones on the inside. And that essentially causes like a torque, okay, like a bending force that turns the plant and makes it grow like this. Okay, so differential rate of growth caused by auxins being secreted to one side of the plant more than the other, or being secreted by one side of the plant than the other. Okay, so you get one side growing faster, and that causes the plant to curve. Okay, what do we got here? 9:49, okay. All right, so the 3 types of tropisms. Okay, first one, geotropism. Geotropism is a growth response to gravity. Okay? It happens because a plant knows which way is up and down, and it's trying to grow or balance, okay, because it's been tipped over, all right, or something like that. So you can see like this tree right here has a curved trunk, whereas this one is straight. Okay, and geotropism can also be present if you have plants growing on a forest floor and they actually can't see the sun because they're shaded. They'll grow upwards because up is generally where the sun is. Most of the time you see geotropism, okay, on a plant that's been tipped over or had to grow around something, okay, something like that. That's usually where you see geotropism. Okay, phototropism, growth response to light. So it is a plant growing towards light. Okay, so the side that's shaded grows faster than the side that's not. Okay, so more auxins on this side here. Okay, so these cells get longer than the cells on the inside of the stem, and that will bend the plant towards the light. Okay. And then lastly, thigmotropism. This is a growth response to touch. Right, so bamboo can really show thigmotropism. You can train it by just continuing to push it or tie it, okay, and cause it to move. Some plants will put like vines or tendrils around things. So if you've ever grown like peas, you put a fence beside them and they'll crawl up the fence, okay, because they'll put these little tendrils around. Lots of things will do that. Sweet peas, beans, okay, things like that. They'll just grow on fences. Hops, okay, will do that. They'll grow right up the side of a building. Ivy does the same thing, grows right up the side of a building because it can detect that there's something there it can grab. Okay? And sometimes it's a matter of just wrapping around, okay? And other times it's a chemical thing. So some plants, when they detect a surface that they can latch onto, will actually secrete chemicals that are like acidic that will dissolve that surface and allow them to put like a growth, a tendril into a pit that they chemically erode, okay, into the surface. Ivy does that, okay? This plant here also does it. Okay, there's little nodules, it's hard to see, but there's little nodules everywhere on it. And when those nodules come into contact, especially with drywall, okay, it'll actually erode into the drywall, okay, and then it'll grow a little thing that can grab the drywall and allow it to crawl. Okay? Ivy, like I said, does the same thing with concrete and brick. All right. We've got a little bit of time here. I'd like you guys to have a look at those questions, maybe just write a couple of quick answers for those.